In the tales of the kings and queens of ancient Israel and Judah, few figures stand out as boldly wicked as Athaliah. She was the daughter of Jezebel, the infamous pagan queen who almost succeeded in stamping out the worship of Yahweh in the northern kingdom of Israel. Like her mother, Athaliah was a fervent follower of the false god Baal, and her royal reign brought idolatry and violence to the kingdom of Judah. This is the dramatic story of Athaliah's rise to power through treachery and her 6-year reign of terror as she tried to wipe out the royal line of David. It's a tale of palace intrigue, secret plans, and a daring rescue that saved the Davidic dynasty from extinction. Get ready to be shocked by Athaliah's ruthless acts and awed by how God preserved his promises against all odds. So who was this daughter of Jezebel? What drove her unspeakable actions? And how did she ultimately meet her downfall? Let's dive into this riveting biblical account from 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. Athaliah's very name meant Yah is exalted, but her life was the opposite of exalting the one true God. She came from a family line steeped in pagan idolatry. Her mother was the notorious Jezebel, the Phoenician princess who married King Ahab of Israel. Jezebel zealously promoted the worship of the false gods Baal and Asherah, leading Israel into immorality and violence. She had many of the Lord's prophets slaughtered and sought to kill the mighty prophet Elijah. After Jezebel's infamous death at the hands of Jehu, her daughter Athaliah married into the royal family of the southern kingdom of Judah. She became the wife of King Jehoram, who ruled in Jerusalem from 848 to 841 BC. Through this marriage, the wicked spiritual influence of Jezebel began infiltrating the people of Judah. The biblical writers clearly saw Athaliah as following in her mother's footsteps of idolatrous depravity. Like Jezebel, she showed no regard for the Lord. She actively led her husband and the people of Judah astray into pagan Baal worship. When Jehoram died, their son Ahaziah continued this downward spiral into false religion and corruption during his brief 1-year reign. He too fell under the malevolent influence of his wicked mother Athaliah. The author of 2 Chronicles laments that his mother was his counselor in doing wickedly. So the stage was set for Athaliah's unthinkable power grab and reign of terror. She would build on the spiritual rot and violence that her mother Jezebel helped institutionalize. Little did the people of Judah realize the horror that was about to unfold. When Ahaziah died childless in 841 BC, the rightful heirs to Judah's throne were his younger brothers and nephews from the royal line of David. As their grandmother, Athaliah should have been responsible for protecting and raising the young princes. Instead, this sinister queen saw an opportunity to seize ultimate power by eliminating all of her own grandsons. In one of the most heartless and ruthless acts recorded in the Bible, Athaliah set out to murder every single male descendant from the royal line. 2 Chronicles grimly reports, when Athaliah the mother of Ahaziah saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family of the house of Judah. Can you imagine the cunning depravity it took for this grandmother to systematically hunt down and assassinate each of her own grandsons, babies and young boys? What unfathomable cruelty! Only one grandson miraculously survived this grisly massacre. The infant Josh was secretly rescued by his aunt Jehosheba, the wife of the priest Jehoiada. She courageously hid baby Josh and his nurse in a bedroom in the Lord's temple to prevent him from being killed by the bloodthirsty queen Athaliah. With no remaining male heirs from David's royal line, the path was clear for Athaliah to take the throne for herself in 841 BC. She became the first woman to rule as a reigning monarch over the kingdom of Judah. Feminist scholars point out the irony that the first female ruler in Judah came to power only through egregious violence and oppression, the very opposite of advocating for women. Rather than being a positive force, Athaliah's reign represented the most wicked feminist archetype. She seized control through the massacre of her own flesh and blood grandsons. With the male heirs to the throne eliminated, Athaliah could have chosen to rule as a unifying and benevolent queen. Instead, the biblical authors pull no punches in portraying her 6-year reign from 841 to 835 BC as one of sheer terror and spiritual darkness. The writer of 2 Chronicles is unequivocal in his scathing denunciation: Athaliah was a wicked woman. the daughter of infamous Jezebel brought the depravity of bull worship and its associated immorality into the heart of Judah and Jerusalem. Under Athaliah's reign, the Temple Mount became unrecognizable. Rather than being a center of Yahweh's pure worship, it was transformed into a hub for lurid bull rites and unbridled pagan licentiousness of all kinds. Beyond Jerusalem, Athaliah spread this cancer of idolatrous depravity throughout the villages of Judah. Known Yahweh followers faced discrimination and persecution. It was an all-out assault on the spiritual heritage of God's covenant people. Speaking truth to this evil power could be a death sentence, as so many prophets had met violent fates for confronting Jezebel. With no prophetic voices raised, the people slid deeper into syncretism and apostasy. The godly remnant could only lament in private and wonder how much worse it could possibly get. Little did they know that a daring secret plan was being put into motion under their noses in the very temple precincts. In the heart of this dark reign, a light of hope for Judah was being carefully tended behind closed doors. As Athaliah consolidated her idolatrous grip on Judah for 6 long years, a secret conspiracy was brewing under the leadership of the faithful priest Jehoiada. He was raising Joash, the lone surviving heir from David's line, in the hidden chambers of the temple compound. The biblical narrative drops only hints about these early years of Joash's childhood in sanctuary. We can imagine the young prince being brought up in the ways of Yahweh without ever setting foot outside the temple walls. The faithful few discreetly providing for his needs. Watching him grow in wisdom and stature, firmly grounded in the ways of David's God. Then in Joash's 7th year in 835 BC, Jehoiada judged the timing was right to bring him forth from concealment. He summoned loyal officers and palace guards to the inner courtyard of the temple. In groups small enough not to arouse suspicion, they arrived until a full-armed contingent had assembled in sworn allegiance to Joash as Judah's rightful king. Then in a dramatic coronation scene, 7-year-old Joash was escorted through the temple's towering pillars into the view of this warrior assembly. Jehoiada produced the royal crown and ceremonial accessories from storage. With the ancient words of covenant blessing, he publicly anointed the boy and placed the crown on Joash's head. At this pivotal moment, Athaliah rushed in from the palace to confront the commotion. Imagine the shocking sight that met her eyes: the armed guards, the priestly blessing, the heir to David's throne wearing the king's regalia. Everything she had fought so hard to destroy through infanticide, idolatry, and terror on full display. In a fury, Athaliah screamed the Hebrew word for treason, ripped her regal robes, and demanded the soldiers kill the child claimant to her throne. But the commander Jehoiada had secretly rallied them to Joash's cause. At his order, the soldiers formed ranks defending the newly crowned young king. Then came the command that sealed Athaliah's doom: take her out between the ranks. Jehoiada cried out. The soldiers seized the howling and resisting Athaliah, dragged her from the temple grounds to a nearby entrance to the palace complex. There beside the royal stables and chariots, her 6 years of unspeakable evil met its bloody end. 2 Kings 11 describes simply but dramatically, she was put to death. No more words were wasted on the ruthless daughter of Jezebel. The conspiracy had succeeded, the darkness was over, and the light of the Davidic monarchy had been gloriously restored in 7-year-old King Joash. In quick succession, Joash's coronation was followed by destruction of the idolatrous cultic compounds that Athaliah had erected to all across Jerusalem. Under the young king and his priestly mentor Jehoiada, the worship of Yahweh was restored and the nation of Judah entered a period of spiritual revival and stability. For you students of Scripture, there are some clear reminders and warnings in Athaliah's tragic story. Like her mother Jezebel, she represented the satanic attempt to derail and destroy God's redemptive covenant promises which flow through the royal line of David. If Athaliah's bloody coup to wipe out the royal heirs had succeeded, the line of David would have been severed, leaving no means for the messianic prophecies to be fulfilled. God had to miraculously preserve that bloodline through the baby Joash to keep the way open for the ultimate seed of David, Jesus the Messiah, to be born centuries later. Athaliah's wicked reign is a reminder that evil is real, spiritual opposition is real, and satanic powers are always seeking to oppose and thwart God's plans. But in the end, all of their murderous, deceptive machinations will fail because nothing can derail the sovereign purposes of the Almighty. His promises will stand. There's also a dramatic warning against the insidious nature of idolatry. Athaliah brought the lurid and violent pagan worship of Baal right into the very holy precincts where the presence of God was to dwell. There was no coexisting, it could only lead to spiritual defilement and death. Likewise in our lives today, any attempt to dilute or syncretize our pure devotion and obedience to God with foreign idols of culture or selfish desires leads down a spiritually fatal path. One compromise at a time, our hearts get twisted into serving false gods. The only remedy is to crush those idols out of our lives, just as Judah destroyed and cleansed the Baal compounds under Joash. So from the heinous actions of this ruthless queen, we gain insights into the spiritual battle, God's protection of his covenant purposes, and the deadly nature of allowing idolatrous compromises into our lives. May we learn well and reject the path of this daughter of Jezebel once and for all.